Well, a very good morning. You're now tuned in to yet another informative weekly news review program. That's Media Monitor here on the SABC NEWS Channel. Good morning, I'm Alicia Jali. Thank you so much for choosing us. Here's what you can look forward to this hour. The State of the Nation address was one of the stories that gripped the headlines this week. We get to unpack it in depth. We'll also delve into the ANC's march to Absa. Will the bank pay back the money? We then close the show by, of course, remembering the legacy of Joost Van Der Westhuisen. The nation has truly lost a hero. But first, as always, it's 900 hours, and these are the news that are making headlines across the country. The South African Football Association, SAFA, and Sports Minister Fikile Mbalula have strongly condemned the violent clashes during a soccer match at Loftus Versfeld in Pretoria, where several people were injured after fans invaded the pitch. As Mamelodi Sundowns led Orlando Pirates 6-0 and police used tear gas to disperse them. A decision was indeed taken to complete the remaining 8 minutes of the match, and Orlando Pirates assistant coach Benson Mhlongo has surely apologized to the team's fans for disappointing them. More than 10 houses, including 4 suspected brothels, have been set alight by residents of Rosettenville, south of Johannesburg, while the residents are up in arms with the escalation of drugs and prostitution in the area. Earlier yesterday, 6 people were injured when police clashed with angry residents. The police used stun grenades and rubber bullets to disperse the mob. The city of Johannesburg raided several brothels in the area this week, but residents say the status quo remains. And in some good news there, Cape Town City swept to the top of the PSL standings with a 2-0 win over neighbours arch rivals Ajax Cape Town last night. And despite Ajax creating several goal-scoring chances on the night, the Urban Warriors were unable to find the back of the net. City now leads the PSL on 31 points, while Ajax occupies 11th place, trailing City neighbours by 13 points. All right, well, let's first welcome Mr. Neo Motlong for our digital segment. Neo, very good morning to you.
Morning, Alicia.
All right, and of course, we're very pleased to be joined on the main panel by the 3 wise men. I'm talking about political analyst Mr. Sipho Siepe, Mr. Mcebisi Nglekyana, and media specialist Mr. Shoni Mokari. Gentlemen, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Good morning.
All right, let's kick off this week, Neil. What was big in terms of social media? I think I have a pretty good idea.
Yeah, I think it was the Sona, of course, that was big on social media this week. It was in Cape Town. We asked our followers on Twitter, did President Jacob Zuma address any of your concerns in his speech? And as you can see, 15% of the people who replied said yes, he did, while 66, which is a huge number, said no, he didn't, and 19% of those said he missed an opportunity. That is just from over 400 people who voted. I mean, it was characterized by so many things. On social media.
I'm really interested to get to know what people were saying on social media. I saw the memes.
Yes, there were a lot of memes.
Very entertaining, but let's get to the other side. What were they saying in terms of what transpired in Parliament?
Like Luzoko here, I mean, he says all that unnecessary show of force by militarizing Parliament did not scare the EFF. The ANC has long lost its moral high ground. People are very disgruntled with what happened. Then you have Tembeka here saying South Africa, our great heroes are spinning in their graves in disappointment and agony. What did they die? What did they really die for? Sona 2017. And this one, did we need a boxing commentary in Parliament? Hashtag Sona 2017, blow by blow action as it happens.
Gentlemen, I just want to get your quick reviews. So let's start with you. What did you make of the social media reactions to what actually transpired in Parliament this year?
Well, I think they were quite appropriate. I mean, to bring in the army with guns to Parliament was just a stupid decision. Completely unnecessary, yeah.
All right. Professor Siepe, what did you think?
No, I think militarization and force has never worked in the past. But we need to go beyond the obvious. We should be asking, why do we go into this state of affairs? And one of the things that we must also address is this culture of intolerance that exists within political parties. That in as much as people have right to protest, but there's also the need to respect other people's right to hear what is actually being said, whether you like it or not. But what we find is that we have become so intolerant that even speaking or debating does not become a possibility.
Yeah.
So we must go beyond the obvious, which is easy to condemn, to simply say, can you also respect other people's right to speak? Can you respect other people's rights to hear?
Okay, Prof, we'll talk more about this topic later on in the show, but Neil, take us through the next big hashtag of this week.
The next big one is a very sad story.
Very sad
Joost Van Der Westhuisen, who passed away at the age of 45. He was battling with motor neuron disease,
yeah.
Yes. And this is what people had to say on social media. I mean, they say they lost a great hero. This one says, what a man, what a player at 9 years season, box best number 9, and one of all-time great player of the game. Rest in peace, legend. We had some awesome times.
Oh, man.
He was an amazing man. I had the great privilege and honor to meet him through my wonderful friend, Gavin. Thoughts and prayer go to his family. These are just condolences that people are praying, and this is one
very sad to hear of the passing of one of our greats. Hashtag Joost Van Der Westhuisen. You fought a great fight, and that is, of course, the golfing champion there, Mr. Ernie Els. A very quick one, Shani. What did you make of the reaction?
Well, I was actually surprised that he passed on so early, given that somebody like Stephen Hawking was diagnosed with the same illness many years ago, and he's still alive. So I wonder if he didn't have access to the same resources and technology. So, I mean, I know I'm not commenting on the reaction, but it was just something that stood out for me, that people have been able to live with this kind of illness for a much longer period than expected.
You know, if anything, I think US disease has given more attention to the disease known as motor neuron disease, because a lot of people actually didn't know what it's all about. And I understand he had a more aggressive type. So, Shani, that addresses your question about not having access to the better services. Gentlemen, I'll give you a go at the next big hashtag of this week. Neil, which one was it?
The last one has to be Sundowns versus Pirates, which made news everywhere.
Number
on social
6
media.
again.
Number 6, and now number 6 has taken a new character on social media, as it's characterized as a Pirates thing. I mean, as you can see, this tweet, it's actually a meme, Pirates, where you have people jumping over burning tires, and this one actually it's number 6. The tweet says, after last night Pirates lost, they replaced number 6 with a Pirates icon. So
let's get more tweets on that. Do you have more tweets?
We have more tweets. I mean, this one is a meme also saying they're ready to meet Pirates players. They're holding, knives and stuff.
Oh yeah, with gentlemen, your quick comments there. Let's start with you, please.
Well, I'm afraid I'm not a happy person this morning. Pirates is my team. That was quite disgusting. Well, fortunately, we'll get a coach fairly soon and be back to winning ways, hopefully.
Prof, anything to say there?
No, I'm not into sport, but I know that my nephews are very traumatized. The only time I think of 6 is when I was at school, when they talk about the 6 of the best.
Yeah.
You know you're in trouble.
A lot of people in studio are also upset today. Let's wrap it up with one more tweet there on that topic, Neil.
This is one more tweet. I mean, when Pirates play, President must authorize 441 military servants at the stadium. I mean, it was hectic.
Very interesting indeed. Well, unfortunately, those were the digital media trends this week. Now, where can they find all this information and, of course, the show afterwards?
The show you can find it on YouTube at SABC Online, and you can find the stories on www.sabc.co.za/news.
All right, we're going to take a quick ad break, and after that, we unpack the State of the Nation address. Do stay tuned. Welcome back to Media Monitor now. The State of the Nation address took place this past week and was marred by a number of disruptions from opposition parties, with various points of orders, members of parliament being thrown out or others walking out. President Jacob Zuma took to the podium an hour later. The president kick-started his address by touching on the economy. He touched on how government is anticipating a growth rate of 1.3% this year, and he spoke about methods that government will actually utilize to achieve that economic transformation. Now, on education, the president noted that 895 new modern schools have been built so far, and that government will prioritize on mathematics and science subjects, stating government's investment in science and technology is bringing very fruitful results. Now, the land redistribution issue was also among topics that were featured in his speech. But let's see what President Jacob Zuma started his address by stating about the economic outlook. Here's more on this insert.
While the global economic environment remains uncertain, indications are that we have entered a period of recovery. We anticipate an economic growth rate of 1.3% in 2017, following an estimated 0.5% in 2016.
Gentlemen, what did you make of the State of the Nation address, particularly the means that the president says the country is going to take to prioritize economic transformation?
Well, I think the entire speech was about the economy.
Yeah.
And the way, if you have to be fair to characterize it, you'll realize that the first part was really about him reporting on what has been done since 2014 in terms of the promises around the issue of energy, the promises around the workplace conflict, the promises around the youth, and the promises around the socio-economic infrastructure. Then thereafter, he then moved to deal with the issue of defining what the economic transformation is and what radical economic transformation is.
Yeah.
Because that has always been, the problem with the ANC is that it has always pursued a method of inclusion into a certain power structure. And that power dictates on how fast you can move. So what we see is a certain level of impatience within the ANC and within broad society that says we are not making headway on the economic front. We may talk about consolidation of democracy, political freedom, but when you look at the statistics around ownership, around management, around control, you find that we are simply onlookers. So you could actually say there's been a failure on the economic front. And what you see is an attempt by the ANC to begin to dictate to government what they think should happen. So my reading of it was simply to say, what have I done? And let me just before do that, he said in 2014 we had load shedding. Yeah. Today we have addressed that matter. And instead what we have surplus, and there have been 7 million people who have actually benefited. Then workplace conflict, he actually thanked the social partners to say, so far we have not had national strikes, whether they're going to come or not. But it is something that is worth encouraging people to do. And also the negotiation in the Platinum Belt to say that has been resolved. And there's a national minimum wage, says they thank the Deputy President to say you have done well.
Yeah.
But then he moved on to issues that are going to be very problematic and contested, the issue of land.
Prof, you know, I just want to hear from the rest of the gentlemen. I jotted down while he was talking, and these were some of the things that stood out. I mean, the blacks that are still underrepresented when it comes to the workplace, the female versus male representation. Yes. There's this bill that is going to be mandating constructors to employ 30% black-owned companies. I thought that was nice. They're going to speed up the title deeds. And there's a black business industrialization that is seeking to industrialize the black business, and also they want to industrialize mining as well. So those were some of the good reports that the president touched upon, Kibis.
We'll have to be an asset-owning society. We have to give our freedom meaning. We have a history in this country of dispossession where black people were pretty much disowned of their property. So if we have to speak of freedom, those things must be returned back. freedom has got to have full meaning, in the sense that you cannot sustain an economy that has 25% unemployed people. And most of those are young people. They don't have a stake in the system. They wake up in the morning, they have nothing to do, they have no hope. If you have that kind of inequality, these are people who are open to demagoguery politics. They can be easily mobilized against the system because the system does not care for them. So we cannot continue as business as usual. Fortunately, the ANC seems to have developed courage lately. This is something that should have been done a long time ago. And it was always inevitable that at some point, because a party of liberation that promised a better life must deliver, at some point people become impatient. And I'm glad that the ANC is not really worried too much about business that, and business has been hypocritical. Business has been paying itself huge amounts of salaries, and now they are complaining about a basic salary of 3,400 rand. So government must continue, because if government doesn't do anything, it's damned either way. There will be an uprising in this country if inequalities are not addressed, and we might as well act now.
Shoni?
Well, what I picked up, which I found encouraging, was the fact that obviously they mentioned that government spends 500 billion, and they're going to use that as a lever to try and fast-track transformation. But more importantly, the 150 billion that is essentially earmarked for small businesses. But then there's a problem. There's a structural problem within departments in terms of procurement. When you actually fill in those forms, if your business is, has not been in existence for less than a certain number of years, you're essentially penalized for that. So how do you encourage small black-owned businesses to get into the system while you're going to penalize them for being new and and young entrepreneurs? So essentially, they need to address those structural issues. It's one thing to say we're going to earmark 150 billion to channel into small businesses, but you don't address the structural problems of actually absorbing those small businesses. Otherwise, you're fighting against yourselves. You're saying one thing on the other hand, but structurally, it's almost impossible for those small, especially black-owned businesses to get into the system.
Yeah, and I mean, something very interesting there that he touched on was, of course, the slow pace of transformation within the workplace, particularly for women. I had to raise that point, Prof.
Yeah, well, I think there's a point that Nkabisa has raised, which is very important, that we are a country where people were dispossessed. And if you start from there, you know that there's an injury, there's an injustice that must be addressed. And you found it coming in the speech. But most importantly, it's, I think, the point that you talk about the courage. It has always boggled our minds why this government, you have 62%, and you have 100% at the executive level, and you are not able to effect change. So what you found here was that commitment. But I think, coming back to your point, part of the problem has always been that most of the policies that have been written, especially in government, have been written by largely white people. Yeah. There is no way that a white person will write a policy that's going to disadvantage them. So what we did, we became too satisfied with hugging each other in a sports field. But the truth of the matter is that doesn't take you anywhere. As soon as you leave the sports field, I go back to my squatter camp, my colleague goes back to Lower Hutton. So we never addressed the key issues. So this notion of saying sports unite is just nonsense. But coming back to the numbers,
a quick one, Prof.
It is a problem that actually you see representation, you also see asset ownership. Yeah. They go together. If your representation is 10%, you are likely to have 10%. Yeah. But even at the level of idea formation, ideas are not formed by the majority in this country. And it's also because the ANC itself believes in white tutelage.
All right, Prof, let's leave it there on that matter, because on the sensitive issue of land, this is what the president had to say.
Members, it will be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve true reconciliation until the land question is resolved. Only 8 million hectares of arable land have been transferred to black people, which is only 9.8% of the 82 million hectares of arable land in South Africa.
You know, Shawnee, the president admitted that they actually government erred by giving an option of whether you want land or you want money. Take us through what you made about what he referred to when he spoke about the land issue.
Well, clearly, the pace of, to start off, the pace of land redistribution is happening at a very, very slow pace, and people are getting impatient. But also there's the issue of questions around the land audit. You know, do we know precisely who owns what where, so that we're able to make those decisions from an informed base? And of course, the issue of, the question of willing buyer, willing seller. We're not going to go very far with that one, I'm afraid, because, if I'm not willing, and that land is locked with various owners, what do? You're not going to create new land, So we have to address the issue of willing seller, willing buyer. And the issue of actually how do you price that land? I think actually there's a legislation that actually gets around that issue in terms of pricing. Because remember, there were land that was actually bought, in inverted commas, at a very low market price, way back just before the end of apartheid. So how do you then take that land and price it at current market prices when the people who acquired it did not acquire it at real market prices? So those issues also have to be addressed to say, you can't apply the same rules when other people, when they acquired land, did not play by the same rules. So to me, that's problematic.
No, that's quite true. We also need a serious mind shift among black people from being consumers to being owners and productive people.
Yeah.
The reason why people would opt for cash instead of land is because they don't imagine themselves generating wealth.
Yeah.
So we need to go back and realize that we once owned this country, and we used to eke our own livelihood. Right? Once we get that mind shift back, then we are onto something. And of course, government said they will help people to farm. They will give them support, because it's not enough to give people land and without the necessary support, because then you are setting them up for failure. So I'm very encouraged by this speech, especially from this president, who's been extremely disappointing. But this time around, he lived up to the moment, I must say.
Professor, let's
You might disagree with me, Sipho, but...
What do you think, Prof?
No, as I say, I agree that this was a very good speech. Both in terms of approach, but in terms of the issues.
Yeah.
And as I said, for me, it zeroed on the economy. Because all other things, for as long as you don't address the people's livelihood, you can talk about all these wonderful things, social cohesion, they mean nothing. So you saw an effort. But what was also good about it is to put the statistics, almost a reality check for South Africans, even for black people, to say you are still strangers in your own country. And when you do that, it empowers you to come up with something that could be radical. It could actually be saying, this is not on. But you're also responding to the impatience that is emerging in almost every sector of our society, whether it's a black business, whether it's students, whether it's unemployed. So people are not happy with the post-1994 narrative.
Yeah.
That narrative was always flawed. And some of us had raised it. It took the ANC longer because the ANC always preferred to be guided by other people. So now the chicken have come home to roost. And you see a shift that is actually proper.
But I think Sipho, you're being extremely harsh. Things have their own natural course. We're a country coming out of war, right? So you had to have some level of reconciliation. You had to rebuild a society. You don't rebuild a society by going back into conflict. So that was a necessary path that we had to go through. But what has followed that has been white denialism. White denialism, which has been an insult to the intelligence of black people. White people saying their wealth was earned through just means, that the fact that black people don't have anything, they are lazy. Denying the history of dispossession in this country. So there's impatience, especially at that falsehood, at that hypocrisy of white society. So those things, I think that's what Sipho says when he says the chickens are coming back home to roost, because we've been saying let's redress this thing. Let's play along, but what we've been getting as black folk is a snub and lies. So those lies are now creating a backlash.
All right. Well, we're going to leave it there on that topic, but we'll have more on the State of the Nation address when we return. Do stay tuned.
Technology is all around us and some can't live without it.
There's also the problem of internet connectivity.
I was speaking to a robot.
It also makes a few governments panic and therefore they block the internet from time to time.
They just banned the internet, which is the source of my livelihood.
For African technology and social media news, join me, Phumelele Zondi, on Network every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
Back. We're still watching Media Monitor and we are still discussing the State of the Nation address. Let's now shift our focus and hear what the President had to say about health.
Distressed by the death of so many psychiatric patients in Gauteng. Mentally ill patients are some of the most vulnerable members of society who need protection from the state itself and society as a whole. I've instructed the Minister of Health to ensure that the health ombudsman's recommendations are wholly and speedily implemented without any reservations. We welcome the recommendation of the health ombudsperson that there is an urgent need to review the National Health Act of 2003 and the Mental Health Act of 2002 with a view that certain powers and functions revert back to the National Minister of Health.
Shoni, what did you make of how this tragedy was actually addressed during the State of the Nation address?
You know, it's a pity. ANC MPs missed an opportunity there. You know, the DA rose up and said, can we observe a moment of silence? Whether the Speaker was going to allow that or not, it's a different topic. I think it should have actually come from ANC MPs, essentially saying, you know, we are part and parcel of, you know, we're going through this process of self-correcting, we're going through this process of, you know, being accountable to the people, and we felt that. And for me, I thought it was a missed opportunity that it had to come from the DA instead of coming from the governing party to say, you know what, we are seriously concerned about that. It's obviously an important issue. That's why the president put it on his State of the Nation address. But I think they should have been the one to actually rise up and say, can we please observe a moment of silence? I agree with the Speaker for not allowing it, because otherwise she would have opened the floodgates for other moments of silences and other things to come through. But I think it was a missed opportunity.
Kabisa, what do you think?
I think the Speaker should have allowed it. It's a humane thing to do. There's something endearing about honesty, marking someone's death, and in this case, 94 people died. It's quite unfortunate that this happened in Gauteng, the most progressive province in the country. So you know, we must know the whole truth. People must be held to account. You don't have 94 people dying. I mean, Prof. Makhoba did say that the passing of a person is not an easy thing. You know, things happen for a person to die. And in this case, some of them died of dehydration. They didn't die because they were mentally ill. They were starved. They were denied of water to death. So there must be accountability. We are a country of laws and we have to behave like it.
What do you think? What do you think? How do you think they're going to deal with the recommendations of the reports, Professor? Do you think they're going to be properly effected?
Well, I think the Gauteng government had indicated that it regrets what happened, and they accepted their responsibility. And I think the president has been very clear about what has to happen. That all of them must be implemented, that there should be no attempt to review any of the recommendations by Professor Makgoba. So that in itself is positive. But the point that Shoni was also raising is really the issue of the opportunism of the DA, but also that the ANC itself. But as Jackson Mthembu put it, that the DA was being opportunistic because on matters like this, what do, you talk to all other parties and then there's an agreement. There would have been. But because they saw an opportunity, because remember this is a space where the DA is always upstaged by the EFF. So they had to come up with something that will touch our pain. So I think for me, I would have actually said the speaker should have allowed it, and then we could have had a discussion afterwards. Because when you deal with issues of emotions where people have died, it should touch you a little bit to say, no, but here I have nothing to lose. Because they have nothing to lose. You stand for 30 seconds and that's it. But to then belabor the point was almost, it makes you a bit heartless. But I could also hear what Shoni is saying, that you also do not want to start creating. But I thought that this was really too fresh. And once the government has already accepted, and also those people should know that the president was going to cover it, they should have just allowed it.
Steve Biko, you should know better. Steve Biko said we should be the best that we can be, regardless of what other people think or say or behave, because we have our own moral compass. So it does not matter if the suggestion comes from the DA.
Exactly.
As a person, as a humane person, you need to know that those things need to be marked. A message of condolence, really, regardless of who says what.
All right. Well, let's leave it there, gentlemen, because education was a subject. Many were very eager to hear the comprehensive solutions on this. Here's what the president said. All right, we don't have a clip on that one. Gentlemen, let's talk about that. I mean, education, the big pinnacle of the Sona. I mean, what did you make of the new announcement of government raising the NSFAS funding? Prof?
Well, the government has been doing that for some time. And I think what we need is much more of a comprehensive solution. And I'm not even sure that throwing money at the problem is an answer. What we don't have is a national discourse about what is possible within the constraints. You don't have to wait until the State of the Nation address to craft a solution. We should, in higher education, these guys should have been talking about it all along. For instance, young people are raising issues that why should it cost 4 times more to study at VETS or at UJ than to study at the University of Venda when you talk about you have quality assurance. They're raising those issues. And what they are saying is that can you achieve more with less? And get more people in. So that is one aspect. It's good that they put in money. Then the second aspect is really what we do at universities. It cannot be right that our students graduate to unemployment. So what it also means is that there's a dislocation between what is offered there and what the economy needs. So I do think that we should not think that throwing money will be sufficient. For instance, here's something talk about, they call the missing middle. Young students at VETS Adam Weep says, well, it will be about 8% and all that. He says, for me, if I have to pay 100,000 and you tell me about 8%, even if the government covers that, it means nothing, because if I have to pay 100,000, what is the extra 8,000? So we need to be much more sophisticated, because they are saying the very 100,000, even without an increment, it's hard for me. And the president had given all these realities in terms of the conditions of poverty. So we need far greater discussion that is more nuanced than throwing money at the problem.
Yeah.
Really, do you think it's throwing money at the problem, though, Shani? Because, I mean, that has been at the very basis of this argument that these students cannot afford to go to higher education. He did announce there will be no fee increase at TVET colleges and universities for some of the qualifying students, and 32 billion rand has been reprioritized to support the higher education sector.
Alicia, let me speak to you from my position of an employer. I am actually shocked at times when I'm interviewing people who are supposedly graduates. So to me, in terms of what the inability for people to think strategically, the inability of people to solve problems. So the quality of what we're producing is something that we need to look at as well. Yes, money is part of the problem in that obviously you cannot exclude somebody who's clearly capable of going through a university or higher education training process. But we shouldn't just look at money. Students, as the Prof was saying earlier, have actually put a much broader agenda. They're talking about decolonization of the education system. They're talking about the quality. They're talking about a whole lot of other things. And yet we seem to be only focusing in our response on the money aspect only. And in fact, we're narrowing the debate to just the money issue.
No, we need serious state intervention, because what we are doing is to reproduce inequality.
Like what?
It means that if you are a black kid from a working class family, chances of you climbing up the social ladder are very slim, because education is an enabler. If we were to de-racialize our society and enable people to move, to become productive, we need to invest in education. It's not something that we do accidentally. It must be a deliberate thing, because we want to be a knowledge-based society, and to be productive and innovative. To get there, you need education. But it's not just about fees. They have to be fed. They have to be accommodated. So you must have a holistic program, not just fees.
All right, in order to be able to participate in our economy. Well, after the break, we asked whether the Absa Bank will pay back the money. Find out after this break. Promise, we're back now. Thousands of ANC supporters made their way to Absa Towers in the Johannesburg CBD on Friday to hand over a memorandum to officials at the bank. Now, this comes after a leaked preliminary public protector's report which recommends that the bank pay back 2.2 billion rand it received as part of an unlawful apartheid-era bailout. Now, this follows last week's storming of an Absa branch in Durban by the ANC Youth League as part of their National Occupy campaign. The marchers have since given Absa 21 days to respond to their memorandum, failing which they will occupy every branch countrywide. Here's more on this insert.
The party's Gauteng Youth and National Women's League masterminded Friday's demonstration. What began as a peaceful march by thousands of mainly Progressive Youth Alliance members turned tense when protesters torched tires and garbage on the streets outside Absa's Johannesburg head office. Police and youth leaders soon called the unruly elements to order. The protest was organized to demand that Absa repay a 2 billion rand bailout it received from the apartheid regime. The march follows the preliminary public protector's report into apartheid debt, which found that Absa may need to repay a 2.2 billion rand bailout. ANC Youth League President Colin Maine says Absa must pay back the billions they owe with interest.
The young people of South Africa and members of the Youth League in particular have responded more than to our expectation. We had thousands and thousands of them coming, and this should indicate to Absa that we are serious about this genuine call that we are making.
The Youth League has offered Absa some time to pay back the money. Leaders warn they will intensify pressure on the financial institution should this demand not be met within a reasonable period. Meanwhile, Public Protector Pusisiwe Mkhwebane has emphasized that the leaked report is not final and could still change dramatically. Dumalo Mohlaudi, SABC News, Johannesburg.
So what do you think about this? I mean, we've been getting two sides of the story. Absa says there's nothing wrong, they're not going to pay back any money, and the Public Protector's report is implying that they are liable to pay. So what is the story?
That report is incomplete in my view, because it's not the first time that issue has been looked at. Judge Heath and Judge Davis looked at that and said, yes, Absa was given money, but to go back and get that money would disrupt our banking system. They came up with a long story explaining why we couldn't do that. So we need to have a conversation. I think those reports must come out to explain why that money was not taken back. Because clearly, if they got a loan and they didn't pay back, that's not right. Some form of justice, some form of correction must happen. But it's a very dishonest conversation. I wouldn't even have issued that report because it raises a whole lot of questions instead of answering things.
That's true.
It alludes to Davis and Heath reports, but it doesn't go into the logic deep enough, right? And it reaches a conclusion. It's like there's a missing link between what it starts saying and the conclusion. So you have a whole lot of questions, and it's a terrible report. The issue it raises is a very fundamental issue because we know that there are money missing, right? We need to find a way of getting to know what happened to all those monies. But the report itself is very inconclusive. I wouldn't have issued that report. I think we need to discuss this a lot more. A lot more information needs to come out so that we make informed decisions, not speculate.
What did you understand of the report?
First of all the reports from Davis to Heath indicate that the bailouts should not have happened.
Yeah.
So in the same way that we are always eager to correct and to lambast especially black people, we must also be consistent. But what I found interesting, and actually this is actually correct, that what we need is transparency. We need to have a full understanding of what the issues are. And for me, it's not even the decision not to pay. If the decision not to pay makes sense and it's good for the economy, then so be it. But what I find amazing is that the usually loud-mouthed organizations around any whiff of corruption have suddenly become quiet. I don't hear the Nelson Mandela Foundation out there. I don't see Corruption Watch out there making the same suggestion. I mean, I'm not saying find fault, but I'm saying in the same interest that you talk about promotion of corrupt-free society. Show the same anger, show the same willingness to say, let's subject this to some commission so that all the answers can emerge. But the Nelson Mandela Foundation is quiet, Freedom Under Law is quiet, Corruption Watch is quiet, and all other, usually they're all quiet. Because the impression that comes that if it involves white people, suddenly it doesn't matter. But part of it is because black people are always under suspicion. We always have to say, but when it's white, we must find a way of explaining it away. And that to me is the hypocrisy that we find around this matter. And it's unfortunate that the ANC Youth League, by the way, it's the ANC Youth League that has been marching, it's not the ANC.
Yeah.
The ANC, I would like to hear what they have to say about it, because I've not heard anything, because it appears that some of their gurus seem to be emerging somewhere in the world. But as I say, there might be a better explanation, but let us know about that explanation.
But gentlemen, then a lot of people are asking about, this was a an apartheid era bailout. So then doesn't the question of legislation then come into account? Shani, speak to that. And also let's talk about the This Now Action Occupy campaign that has been undertaken by the ANC Youth League.
Well, a lot of things, as we all know, happened during apartheid, and I think I've commented on this issue before on this show that it was clear that that bailout should never have happened. In fact, in the manner in which phone calls moved from one person to the other, including the Reserve Bank governor at the time, to actually effect this bailout. But then we drew a line, didn't we, and said, you know what, we want to start afresh. Clearly, the level of transparency we expect from our institutions today is very different from the standards that were set back then.
Yeah.
But just jumping into another issue still around the same problem, business will regularly do environmental analysis in terms of the environment in which they operate in. And one of the things that they will do is to find out the political climate. If this radical economic transformation tends to have substance, I think you'll find the bank might gravitate towards paying. If not, I think you'll find the bank will probably tend to just ignore it. You remember, I don't know if most people remember that people like Hugo Boss, for instance, back in the days, used to actually manufacture SS uniforms.
Yeah.
Business just goes along with the mood of the day. Yeah. They never rock the boat, and I suspect Absa will try and do the same. They'll try and gauge the political climate. Are we going to be in trouble here? Can we lose other billions in terms of banking the state funds? If not, you know what, it's the Youth League. We'll just ignore them.
Tabisi, talk to us about this Action Occupy campaign. Is it going to bring any resolution, or we're going to see further damage then?
That's a dishonest campaign. It has political motives behind it. It's part of this rhetoric of white monopoly capital and the banks having chucked out the Guptas. I mean, this is a Gupta-sponsored initiative. The ANC Youth League president, we know who is handled by. We know where he gets his money for his house. This is a facade, right? So I mean, they will do what they do. I'm not entirely surprised that they're doing it because we expect them to do that. Well, it's part of their campaign, really. To paint banks. That is why Pravin Gordhan is now harassed by this network of people who are saying he's in the pockets of the bank. So it's part of that campaign. It's a dishonest campaign. But let me say this. If Absa has to pay, it must pay because of a well-thought-out decision. It can't give in to a mob that is fabricating injury. Because then you can go out manipulating and blackmailing people. This is a blackmail.
Yeah, no, actually, I just have to pitch it. I think let's take out the conspiracies out. Let's deal with the facts.
What are the facts?
The facts are clear. That money was given out.
Money must be paid back.
And I think even the people who are involved do not deny that fact. But what they are raising is that there might be other reasons that would suggest that the way Absa has gone through is proper. But the point that Shoni is raising, that it also depends on the political mood, that the politics ultimately dictate. So in as much as there might be credence in what he says, but I would like to deal with the facts. Was the money that was transferred that should not have been transferred? And can that money be returned? All the other conspiracies,
case closed.
We leave them.
Let's leave it there. After the break, the highlights and legacy of Joost continues after the short break. Do stay tuned.
Technology is all around us and some can't live without it.
There's also the problem of internet connectivity.
I was speaking to a robot.
It also makes a few governments panic and therefore they block the internet from time to time.
They just ban the internet, which is the source of my livelihood.
For African technology and social media news, join me, Phumelele Zondi, on Network every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
Welcome back. Now, fallen former Blue Bulls and Springbok captain Joost Van Der Westhuisen was laid to rest in Pretoria on Friday after a moving memorial service at the local Loftus-Versfeld Stadium. Van Der Westhuisen succumbed to the very rare motor neuron disease earlier in the week, and members of the 1995 Rugby World Cup winning team, including captain Francois Pienaar, were among the hundreds who came to bid farewell to the hard-tackling world-class scrum half. With us in studio, we have our own sports analyst, Mr. Jody Hendricks, who will take us through Joost's life, his rugby highlights, and of course, his legacy. Jody, so what a pleasure to have you in studio. Very good morning.
Good morning, Alicia.
Jody, take us through, what a life full of memories of a super rugby legend. I can remember yours from high school.
Yeah, Joost, obviously, he became a household name. I think he made his debut for the Springboks in 1993, played a pivotal part for the Boks in 1995 when we won the Rugby World Cup. Would you ever forget the first tackle he made on the, giant of a Jonah Lomo?
Yeah.
And his career since then has just escalated into superstardom. He was the first guy to step up when the team needed a captain before the 99 World Cup, and Nick Mallett appointed. He was the go-to guy for Nick Mallett. So he was definitely a legend. He will... his life was a bit of a fairy tale. He was a security guard before he made it big into rugby. In Pretoria. And before he made his debut for the Blue Bulls, and then became a superstar. So I think the life and times of Joost Van Der Westhuisen is definitely one of a kind, and just sad that he had to go in the way that he did.
Yeah, absolutely. Joost had a raw, natural talent. A never die spirit, but he also worked hard on the field of play. How can young rugby players actually emulate that? We need that in our society these days.
I think for a young rugby player, he's the ultimate role model on the field. A lot has been said about his lifestyle off the field as well, but on the field, he was the first guy at practice. He was the last guy to leave. He really worked hard at his craft. Even at the time when he played 89 tests for the Springboks and was captain, he was still putting in the hard yards, trying to inspire the youngsters. So I think that's the leave that young rugby players can take, or young sportsmen can take, and what they can learn from Joost Van Der Westhuisen is to really, if you want to be the best, and Joost was the best, is to really work hard at your craft.
Absolutely. And Jody, he was courageous right till the end when he had to battle a very rare form of motor neuron disease. Let's talk about how he also brought some attention to the disease, and how, he can be remembered for making a mark in that, so to say.
Yeah, I always say, if you look at the media coverage around Joost Van Der Westhuisen, there's four aspects. There was the rugby player, the superstar. Then there was his marriage to the Afrikaans singer Vitone, and they became like the David Beckham and Victoria or Posh Spice of South Africa. It was then when all the scandals hit, the drug use, the extramarital affairs and stuff like that. And then in 2011, it became, he was on this pedestal. In 2011, he was diagnosed with this rare disease, and he became the face of the motor neuron disease, not only in South Africa, but in the world. He's traveled all over the world. He went to England, he went to New Zealand, to make people aware of this rare disease. And he's really done a fantastic job with the J9 Foundation. And, after 6 years, unfortunately lost his battle. But I think the legacy of what he tried to do by raising awareness with the disease will live on. And I know his brother is still very involved with the foundation, and they'll make sure that Joost's legacy and the awareness that he tried to get to people to talk about this disease, and also the health aspects of it, will still live on for long.
Very interesting indeed. I just want to get a quick comment from my panelists there. Gentlemen, your quick reviews about Joost, the legend that he was.
Well, for me, I think it was a great reminder of how the unifying force that sport plays in society. And you could see during his the funeral or celebration of his life that people from different parts of our society came together to actually recognize the role he played.
Not
in
just
sport,
for hugs.
Yes, absolutely.
A quick one.
Yeah, he was a splendid rugby player, and I'm happy that he was honored in the way that he was, because we need to recognize people who make meaningful contribution to society.
Yeah. Prof?
Well, looking at the comments, it looks like it's a person who has managed to appeal to all of us and the best of us. But I like the comment that somebody made, that he was a rock star in the field and also a rock star outside the field. So effectively what it says, that this is a person who was always there. You could not ignore him.
Absolutely.
But as Mdo said, that he's happy that he was honored. And I think that this is what Africans do. that when somebody passes on, we try to look at the contribution that they've actually made,
All right.
rather than to look at the negatives.
Thank you so much to my panelists there. Gentlemen, Jody, a very quick word. How should we best remember Joost?
I think let's remember Joost for the contribution that he made not only to South African rugby, but to South Africa on the field. And, you know, let's take a leaf out of his leadership, the way that he was always willing to lead from the front. And I think South Africans should emulate that and always remember that, you know, he was a rock star of South African rugby.
Thank you so much. Mr. Jody Hendricks joining us here in studio with, of course, the tribute there to legendary late rugby champion Joost Van Der Westhuisen, who was laid to rest earlier this week. Thank you so much for watching our show, Media Monitor. We hope that you will join us again, same time and place next week. I'm back on top of the hour with AM News.